Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Jennifer, and we are a middle-aged couple with a Regal Unlimited subscription, a desperate desire for popcorn, and each other.
And we are not associated with the real corporation, although we love them dearly.
Mm-hmm. They better love us, my God.
We do spend a lot of money on popcorn.
Mm-hmm.
We have a unlimited subscription, which we do pay for.
Through popcorn.
No, we pay for it with money.
Well, yes, we do pay for it, but then we pay for it some more when we go buy popcorn.
Yeah, because the popcorn is expensive.
You know.
And lately, Real doesn't even have the drinks we like, which is sad.
Yeah. Well,
That's
it's the
upsetting.
local one.
Yeah, who knows?
It's a very sad little local one.
I think it's a nationwide shortage.
It is not a nationwide shortage. Their carbonation machine doesn't work because the things that they have are the non-carbonated things.
So we saw a movie, and as we do, and we are
Monday Mystery Movie.
Yes, and we are making a video for every movie we see together in 2025.
That's
true. So we saw this movie together, and the movie was
The Life of Chuck.
The Life of Chuck. This is a much anticipated movie. It is a collaboration.
Although I missed the anticipation about this movie. I'm only vaguely aware of it, but you were much more
I'm a
aware
horror
of it.
dude, and it was really interesting. So, okay. It's the collaboration between Mike Flanagan, one of my favorite horror creators, mostly works in television. This is this is a movie. He's made other movies, I think, but this is a movie. Based on a story written by Stephen King.
A short story.
So this is like horror royalty coming together to make a movie. This is, however, and in fact, the previews we saw for this movie were really kind of out of kilter because some of them were for horror movies, straight up horror movies.
Well, made by the same production company, though. So this is Neon, and that's the hint for the mystery movies. If you aren't aware, like if you haven't tried to scope out what movie it might be, pay attention to the production company in the trailers, because when they show you a bunch from the same production company, it's a mystery movie from that company. So it's a Neon distributors who I read about earlier today because they were the ones that distributed Honora, and there was a article in the Times that they spent $18 million on the Oscars campaign for Honora. The movie cost $6 million to make.
Okay. Well, interesting. So
well, they got a Best Picture award out of it, so money well spent.
So, Life of Chuck. Yes, so some of the previews were for horror movies, some of them were for more normal dramas. And that's the thing. This movie, I would say that there's a lot of horror movie DNA in this.
There is.
Interestingly, because the movie does not intend to be a horror movie.
Yeah.
I think it is very much a Stephen King story. It does have supernatural elements, although they are very careful with those.
Yeah.
But this is not Shawshank Redemption. It's not Hearts in Atlantis. I think that one didn't have any supernatural elements. Every once in a while, Stephen King, actually more often than not these days, Stephen King writes a story that does not have any supernatural elements in it at all, and he sort of like tries to get really literary with it, and then occasionally he writes a story where he's trying to be literary, but he still can't help but put in a little bit of the supernatural, and I think those are a nice mix for him. He, of course, my favorite Stephen King stuff is always the supernatural stuff. Like the heavy-duty supernatural stuff. I love Psychic Kids. But this has a very, I don't even know how, subtle is absolutely the word, subtle use of the supernatural.
Yeah.
We are going to spoil this movie. If you are interested.
We are going to spoil it.
Yeah, we have to.
Okay.
I mean, how else are we going to talk about it?
I mean, I feel like we could talk about it. We couldn't talk about it for 25 minutes.
No.
But, I guess we could talk about, in a non-spoilery kind of way, that this movie has a lot of actors that you would recognize even if you don't immediately know their names, but also actors whose names you would know, Tom Hiddleston and Mark Hamill, most operatively, who you see quite a bit, and then
Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Yes, Chiwetel Ejiofor, who I love. And
he's great in everything he's ever done.
And he's great in this.
Remember seeing him in that episode of Firefly?
No.
Where he comes on the ship and he's like this assassin.
I don't remember that.
And he's just so creepy.
I would believe it.
It's
And I know I
so
saw
good.
it, but I mean, I saw Firefly once, and it's not etched into a place in my soul as it
Okay.
is for many
That's
people
fair.
and many people that I know.
That's fair.
So
That's fair.
I'm sorry. You can
we'll,
love me anyway.
We'll rewatch it immediately after this. We're going to rewatch the entire show tonight.
It's possible to do because it wasn't around that long, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
Still a crime.
Ouch.
Anywho, but you see these actors and their characters in more than one way throughout the movie. And the movie is very much a meditation on life.
Okay, do you want to do spoilers or not?
Well, that was me talking about it in a non-spoilery
non-spoilery
way.
And we can keep doing that.
Yeah. I don't know.
Because we do think that if you have any interest in this movie, even the slightest spark of interest in this movie, if you're a Stephen King fan, if you're a Mike Flanagan fan, you should definitely see it. That's not to say that it's a perfect movie, and I do have criticisms of it. However, I think on the whole, and it took me a while because we talked about this on the way home from the theater. I didn't like it while I was watching it. It really is one of those movies that I only kind of started to think about after the fact and started to really like it after I saw it, after the fade to black.
Yeah, and I had the opposite impression of, I knew almost nothing about this movie, except that there was a Mike Flanagan movie that Mark Hamill was going to be in, right? I didn't know that there was a Stephen King element to it. I didn't really know what kind of horror or supernatural element to it might be, and nothing about what it might be about. And so that's partially why maybe I don't want to spoil it, because I feel like you should watch it with that. But if you're watching this video, you won't have that, because everything I've said so far is more than I knew about the movie when I watched it. But the point is, I lost my train of thought. But so no, you didn't like it while you were watching it.
Yeah.
While I was watching it, I found it so emotionally compelling that I got swept up in the emotion of what this movie was, the story that this movie was telling emotionally, which is not actually a story, but it's an emotional story. And, there's elements of it that aren't perfect, and there's elements of it that don't make sense even in the logic of the movie. And I didn't notice any of that until afterwards in talking about it, where it's like, oh yeah, I guess that kind of didn't add up. But it didn't matter, because I was feeling all these things when that stuff was happening on the screen, and thinking about myself, and thinking about my life, and thinking about my own emotions, and thinking about emotions, and all sorts of stuff. And that just swept me away. And so I found it to be this kind of like beautiful meditation that was able to use its supernatural elements to help achieve the meditation on the emotions that it wanted to convey. And that you couldn't have done, you could have done with a story that was just a normal story. The story is also structured, I think, in a clever and unusual way that
Which
makes
was
it worth watching.
That was my biggest problem with it, but
Okay.
I can't talk about that without doing spoilers.
Well,
I don't think we should do spoilers. I think this should be our shortest video yet.
Well, but you do have a right to have a feeling that this movie just didn't speak to you, or you didn't like it, or it didn't work for you.
That's the thing, because it did. It just took me a while to process. So I think, yeah, there are parts of this movie that I felt like I just could not figure out for the life of me why the creators did it the way they did it. And then thinking back on it now, I'm like, okay, I kind of get it. I still think the movie's broken into 3 acts. 3 or 4?
3 acts.
3 acts. The first act, I felt at the time, was unnecessary. That's a third of the movie. And it really is a third of the movie. I don't feel that way now. I can see why they chose to do this. It hurts a little bit. Okay, so here's the thing that I'm tap dancing around, is that I am a big Stephen King fan. As a child, I was an enormous Stephen King fan. I have complicated feelings about him now. As a horror writer, I have extraordinarily complicated feelings about Stephen King, which I will not go into in this video, because this is not the place for that. As a reader, I find Stephen King difficult to read these days, like his most modern works, because I think that while he was very tapped into the zeitgeist of the 1970s and the 80s, he didn't really care what came after that in a way. This movie could be set in 1959 and you would not change more than about 5 lines of dialogue.
Yeah.
And speaking of dialogue, I mean, Stephen King famously writes dialogue that no human being would ever say out loud, and yet sounds perfectly natural coming out of actors' mouths. It is the strangest thing. He uses a lot of like terms and words that nobody has used in 50 years, if ever. At one point, he described somebody's boyfriend as being star-crossed, which is a word from Shakespeare. The character in the movie would not use that term. Trust me, I'd never heard the term star-crossed. Yeah, there's a lot of that sort of thing in this. Not nearly as much as say, in Stephen King's actual books. I think it's been edited for a modern audience, but yeah, he has this very bizarre style. And while I find it, at its best, I find that style entertaining. At its worst, I find it incredibly corny and unbearable. And there are moments of corniness in this movie that I just really wanted to roll my eyes. That being said, Stephen King is famous for a reason. He's a great writer for a reason, and that reason is that he is a master manipulator of the emotions. He absolutely knows how to get you with a hook and hold you on that hook. Mike Flanagan, also incredible in this regard, in his ability to conjure emotion out of a story that should not deserve it. And the two of them working, I don't know how closely they worked together on this. I don't know if Stephen King actually had anything to do with the actual production, but it's clear that Mike Flanagan is writing a love letter to Stephen King with this movie, I think. He's absolutely faithful to King's voice in this movie.
And see,
in a way that many directors have not been. Like, famously, Stanley Kubrick hated Stephen King's writing, and Stephen King hated Kubrick's version of The Shining. Yeah. Still does to this day, still thinks that the Steven Weber version of The Shining is better. You know, so a lot of people have just thrown out the baby with the bathwater. Flanagan here absolutely is reverent for Stephen King's voice in this piece. Sorry, I'm just talking forever. What were you going to say?
I was going to say the stuff about the dialogue, like, I do absolutely get what you mean. I have read quite a bit of Stephen King, not so much in the last 10 years or so, but, and yeah, there's always, you know, this huge amount of like dialogue and behavior that like don't make sense for, you know, in it, everybody is like 12 and doing all sorts of shit that 12-year-olds don't do or say in any decade. I felt like in this, the supernatural dimension to it, it was clear that there was something spooky-ish happening. So the dialogue being somewhat strange at times made sense because it wasn't clearly a real world, even though it was a very real world. There was something just the slightest bit not right, and the dialogue helped convey that feeling that something was just kind of not right. Yeah. But yet it was still incredibly right in terms of human feeling and emotion. Yeah. You know? So, yeah, I get what you mean. And, yeah, there was both diction and sometimes reference or just the kind of speech that people were giving that didn't kind of match who you would think you were to assume they were. Excuse me, but in that way, it gave that sense of like something here doesn't quite add up. Like this feels like the world that I know, but it is not. Yes. And so that actually kind of helped heighten the whole thing for me rather than detracting from it. Yeah, it is off-putting. I think that's one of the reasons it works for Stephen King is that, his worlds are always ours, but, 2 degrees darker. Yeah. And that is very much, I think you've really got something there that the stilted dialogue definitely sells that. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So what else do we want to say about this? Sometimes the movie feels like it drags. You
I
didn't feel
don't
that
agree.
way.
I don't
Okay.
agree.
Um, I also felt, so the thing is, I thought the movie dragged a little bit, but at the same time, I wanted it to be much, much longer.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Mike Flanagan normally thinks of in terms of a series of television, a 6, 8 episode arc. And I feel like this wanted to be that long. Um, Flanagan absolutely is a master of slowing down and focusing in on a scene and sticking with that scene much longer than any other director might, given the same story. And that happens here. There are a couple scenes here that last a really long time, and I don't think that was a bad choice for
Yeah.
some of them. I think they are so central to the story that they absolutely deserve that space,
Yeah.
and the giving them air like that lets them become emotionally important.
Mm-hmm.
But it did feel just a little beat too long occasionally, and then there were other things that were just completely elided and just cut. And I don't know if they were in the original story.
Yeah, I don't know the original
This is
story.
based on a short story,
Yeah.
so it's not. And King doesn't. King can write a long. King writes novellas all the time, but he
If it's called a short story, this was probably a pretty short piece
Yeah.
initially, because he can write legitimate short stories, like not a 5,000 word story, but
So without spoiling too much, like the movie takes place over the course of 39 years, and we see the first. No, okay,
30 no
39.
32 years, something like that. Yeah.
When you, okay, sure.
Yeah.
No, we're not going to get into specifics, but we don't see a big chunk of those 30,
Yes.
38, 30
Yeah.
whatever years.
Yeah.
They're just cut out altogether, and there are a couple references to them that feel very much like they're meant to leave you in the dark or just give you just enough information to fill in the blank, but at a really sketchy minimal level.
And you noticed that and got stuck on it.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I felt like what was missing, the fact that it was missing, was actually telling you that it was less important than what was chosen to be shown on the screen. Sure. And that while you might quibble with or like be concerned about a life in which what you're shown on the screen is what's most important and the stuff that's missing is not, I felt like that's what the movie was saying, that what is shown in this movie are the key moments.
Yeah.
And that everything else is less key, and you might want there to be something else that is more key, but that's not true in this situation for this story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, like I was willing to be on board with that and with the emotional content of it. Like, I don't, I guess, choose to use the word manipulation for that, because every artistic choice is manipulation, right? Like, you want to get something out of me, whether it's disgust or lust or
I don't mean
tears
manipulation
or whatever.
I don't mean manipulation in a derogatory way. I think that is absolutely Stephen King's genius. It is his absolute artistic ability to get you with these emotional moments that are, that often do feel corny, but he sells them. I think that his ability to get away with some of the stuff he gets away with in his stories is like the hallmark of a real artist. And I think that I don't use the word manipulation in a negative sense. I mean, I think that both he and Flanagan are really masters at crafting a story. And that means getting an emotional response out of the viewer or reader. And yeah, they're both really good at it.
Yeah.
And working together, they made something really special, I think.
Yeah.
Like I said, I mean, I was rolling my eyes for parts of it. I'm not now. Like, looking back on it, I'm like, oh no, that actually does work, doesn't it? That does sell. He did sell that, didn't he? And you kind of have to, because the story is told out of sequence and various other techniques are used, dramatic techniques, that Flanagan, of course, is famous for in his television shows as well. You do have to piece it together after the fact. And I think that's one of the more interesting things about this, is that the movie will say much more to you on the ride home than it does while you're watching it.
Yeah, you do have to watch the entire thing and make a judgment and a feeling about the entire story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
But I thought it was a beautiful movie.
It was great. Yeah, I'm gonna say it was great. I'm struggling with this one because I said I didn't like it. When the credits rolled, I said I didn't like that.
Yeah.
I do now, and that's the funniest thing. It's a jigsaw puzzle, and you don't see the picture on the jigsaw until you actually put the pieces together.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what we have to say about Life of Chuck. We're not going to spoil it any more than that because we do think you should see it.
Yeah. It is a movie that you can watch on streaming and enjoy it in just the same way that you would, while it is, very well shot, it doesn't require something big to appreciate the visual artistry of it. It's very much a storytelling movie, and you could see it on a television screen and be happy.
There's one scene in particular, which is almost the entirety of the second act, that I think works great on the big screen.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
but
all movies are better on the big screen than they are on the small screen. That wasn't the point. But
okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can see it on streaming. It'll be good on that on streaming as well.
Yeah.
All right. I guess thumbs up.
Yeah, definitely thumbs up.
We don't do thumbs up because that's Siskel and Ebert. So.
Well, we just stole their tagline for our channel.
Which
so
one?
We could just Siskel and Ebert go to the movies.
Oh.
That's what that show was called before they got famous, and it just became Siskel and Ebert.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, no, we stole their tagline.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
we're not in the slightest bit creative.
Assuming we don't get sued for copyright infringement.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Bye.